In 1994, Green Day released Dookie, their third album and their first on a major label. It, along with the Offspring's Smash, ushered in a new era of pop punk that dominated radio and MTV for the rest of the decade. Dookie remains one of their best-selling albums and arguably their highest rated among critics and fans alike. But what exactly makes this record so appealing, and why does it continue to resonate with listeners years later? On today's program, we're going to dive into the music and examine each track in order to understand what makes Dookie so great. Kicking things off is the high-energy track Burnout, and while I like this song, if it were me, I would have picked one of the more obvious singles to be my first track on my major label debut. But the more I analyzed the lyrics, the more it became apparent that they chose this song specifically because it's a declaration of not caring. Essentially, this song perfectly sums up the thesis of the album, which I believe is expressing what it's like being someone in their early 20s uncertain about their future. Effectively, this is a reflection of where the band was in their life at this time. Billy Joel was around 20 or 21 when he wrote this, and so I think it's about him coming to terms with being an adult and how that feels different than how he thought it would. I think he sees his only option at this point is to join the masses and get a regular job. He describes this as burning out. Basically, get a job and then just work, eat, sleep, and do that over and over again. This to him is becoming a zombie. I think Billy Joe felt stuck at this point in his life. For Green Day, they were doing pretty good for an independent punk band, but they were more or less breaking even financially. On top of this, there was uncertainty if they ever would have the kind of success they eventually did receive. Essentially, they could keep doing this for the next 10 years and never get anywhere. And so I think through all of this, plus some undiagnosed anxiety issues, Billy Joe coped by not caring. He became apathetic and internalized his emotions, as the second verse so eloquently states. During the bridge, we get a beautiful release of emotions with Trey Cool trading fours with the guitar and bass. Overall, this track is a great introduction to the album, setting a tone for not just the themes expressed, but for the music as well. Moving on to Having a Blast, which is a funny play on words because normally that phrase means to have a lot of fun, but in the case of this song, it's literally about an explosion. The first verse is about Billy Joe having a bomb strapped to himself and blowing everyone up. But as the song progresses, I think it's a metaphor about how anger can build up inside and will eventually need to come out in some form. In the case of this song, as an outburst of emotion. The music here has the same high energy as the last track, but with a darker undertone created by the downstroking of the bass and guitar at the same time. And like the last song, during the chorus, Billy Joe sings he doesn't care. I think in this case, he doesn't care about holding on to his anger anymore, nor does he care about how that will make others feel. The final line is very bleak, saying what you've done in your life means nothing to him. And this stands in sharp contrast to how catchy the melody line is. Plus, you have some great vocal harmonies during this section. One of the best parts of the song is during the bridge. There are moments when all the other instruments drop out and we're left with just Billy Joe's vocals. It feels a bit like surfing or skating when the rider goes into the air. The song just seems to float. He caps this off by trying to relate how all these little things can build up to be a big problem in his head. It's a moment of clarity, but the issue seems unresolved. Did his outburst make things better? He repeats the line, "To me, it's nothing," before the song ends with the distorted guitar ringing out, just letting that last sentiment hang in the air. Track 3 is Chump, and this is basically about Billy Joe being jealous of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, with the crux of the song represented by the chorus. Billy Joe's trying to wrap his head around why he cares about this guy he's never met. In the end, he concludes that he's a chump for even caring about this other guy. Musically, the first part of this song is very typical of Green Day at this time. There's nothing really bad about it, but it sort of gets lost in the mix, especially when we get to the next two tracks. I think what keeps this song interesting is the brilliant breakdown section that happens during the second half. And I love how it all sort of falls apart, or rather falls into the next track, Longview. Trey knocks out a hypnotic rhythm, but it's the bass playing that really shines here. Lyrically, there's not a lot of innuendo going on. It's quite simply about being bored, smoking pot, and masturbating. But it's the way that Billy Joe sings. He delivers with such attitude that for me, he really captures teen angst. And this song overall has this manic feel, sort of an ebb and flow. You have these sort of zoned out moments for the verses, essentially describing being bored. But then in the chorus, it has this primal scream, this release of, hey, I'm going crazy here and I gotta do something about it. And the solution presented is masturbation. The song rounds out with another verse and chorus before it ends with this repeating guitar riff that brings a sense of calm, almost a feeling of, oh, I found something to watch on TV, giving the song some closure, at least for the time being. And again, one of the great strengths of their writing is the relatability of this song. I mean, yes, this is what it was like being a bored teenager in the 90s, but it's not that different than today. We still get bored, just in different ways, and this song rings true to that feeling of boredom. Moving on to track 5, we have Welcome to Paradise, and this is about when Mike and Billy Joe first moved out of the suburbs and started living in a West Oakland warehouse with a bunch of other punks, artists, and musicians. The song is told in sort of a bookended letter to Billy Joe's mom. In the first part, it's only been about 3 weeks since he left home, and he's scared living in the big city because of the unsafe elements. When the chorus hits, it has these wonderful descending harmonies that really captures the terror Billy Joe experiences living in the city. By the second verse, though, things are starting to change. He describes someone being shot, and he questions why he's still living in the city, but it's becoming home to him and he never wants to go back. This is followed by the bridge, which serves to represent both his changing views of the city, but also the passage of time. The bridge breakdown really highlights all of their talents on their individual instruments without any one of them taken away from the other. And I see the final chorus as him saying the city is his home now. I think he really feels this is paradise. I mean, he hasn't forgotten all the bad stuff, but now he loves all the good stuff. Track 6 is Pulling Teeth, and this really showcases how Green Day stood out from the pack with their sense of melody and songwriting. They adopted a poppier sound similar to that of the Ramones or the Clash. They weren't afraid to write catchy songs, which I think was a vital part of their later success. It's interesting that the founder of Lookout Records really saw Green Day as the punk Beatles, and I can really hear what he means with this song. It has a retro sound for the melody of the verses, and the chorus has this great sing-along quality. But lyrically, this is an anti-love song. It was written after Mike broke both of his elbows in an aggressive pillow fight with his girlfriend. He was running with his head down and his arms up, and he turned quickly and hit a beam with his elbows, and somehow that incident turned into this song, and it ended up being about domestic abuse where the woman in the relationship beats up the man. It's looking at why someone would stay in an abusive relationship, and the conclusion is that the pain and fear of being alone is worse than the abuse. Moving on to the last track of side 1, we have probably the most popular song off the album, Basket Case. I mean, what else can I say? This is an incredibly well-crafted song. The way it starts off with just Billy Joe singing with the guitar really emphasizes the lyrics. It makes me feel like he's singing right to me, like he's asking me these questions.
Do you have the time to listen to me whine.
Then the drums come in ever so slightly for the chorus with these brilliant double-tracked vocals / harmonies that really help to illustrate the paranoia being described. Then the drums really let loose over the line, "I think I'm cracking up," helping to drive home the meaning.
It all keeps adding up. I think I'm cracking up.
What follows next is a lovely instrumental interlude that is perfectly accented by this little bass riff. It is just perfect. After this, we get the chorus again before we transition to a mostly instrumental bridge. The lyrics here describe trying to control things that are contributing to his mental state, but it's not that easy as he tells himself to hold on. Following this, we get sort of an instrumental reprise of the verse melody line, and I love the simplicity of the one guitar higher in the mix over a bed of guitar overdubs. I think overall, the song structure is like going through a panic attack. It starts off small, then explodes into full force, and then about halfway through, he tries to regain control, but he can only hang on and ride it out. By the end, the song levels out with a brilliant guitar and bass riff. It's simple, but it adds a sense of calm as well as an air of longing, sort of an incompleteness. It leaves me wanting to hear more, and it makes sense why this was the side one closer. Opening up side 2, we have one of my personal favorite songs, She. This song is loosely based on a feminist poem that was shown to Billy Joe by his girlfriend at the time. The poem addresses gender roles for women and how they can be damaging, and this perspective was a revelation for him. This song tackles the same themes of the poem, but with a more direct approach in my opinion. The song is from his perspective, and maybe for the first time really recognizing the gender roles and expectations placed on women. For the first verse, it's just the drums and bass playing in a rather restrained manner. This pulls the focus to the incredibly well-written lyrics that describe her in a rage with such descriptive imagery. In the second verse, she realizes that her insecurities are the product of other people's judgments towards her. Musically, this verse is played with more aggression and cymbal crashes, which I see as representing the release of her built-up rage. After the second chorus, Billy Joe literally screams, and this perfectly segues to the instrumental bridge. I see this section as her breaking the silence with the brick of self-control, as perfectly represented by the extra cymbal hits by Trey. But the highlight for me is the bass. As Mike dances around the fretboard, I picture her dancing as she smashes things. This song is still very relatable no matter your background. I mean, when I was young, I didn't really pay much attention to the lyrics, and yet this song really resonated with me. Something about the sound of it made me feel okay when things didn't go my way. Up next, we have Sassafras Roots, and this was inspired by the same girlfriend who showed Billy Joe the poem in the last song. However, they are not together yet in this song. In the first verse, he describes hanging out with her and questioning why she's not with another guy. The last stanza and the chorus are basically saying, hey, we should be together and waste each other's time. In the chorus, he sees her as an equal, calling her a waste like him. But in the second verse, it feels a bit darker. He calls himself a parasite, and I find that compelling because of the title of this song. Now, I realize this is a total stretch, but the roots of the North American sassafras tree are the main ingredient in root beer, but they can also cause cancer over time or in high doses. And since Mike titled the song, it makes me wonder if he was making a comment about their relationship. Maybe he's saying in small doses they were a sweet couple, but they spent too much time together and thus things didn't work out, as well as they weren't good for each other in the long run. Musically, this song is sort of like Chump in the fact that if you were just to play this on shuffle, it would get kind of lost in the mix of Green Day songs. It's a solid track from this era with catchy melody lines, but it doesn't necessarily stand out. For me, it's the lyrics that keep this song interesting. Moving on to track 3, we have another huge single off the album, When I Come Around. I think this song is about the difficulties of being in a long-distance relationship and also a statement on taking her time and not forcing things. Billy Joe met his future wife while on tour in 1990. At the time, she lived in Minnesota, and Billy Joe would often plan their tour so that he could see her. It would take 4 years and some relationships in between before they finally got married in July of 1994. In a 2002 interview, Billy Joe said of the vision behind Dookie, "We wanted simple songs that didn't have BS like guitar solos, for everyone to put as much energy into it as we could, and for everyone's parts to get highlighted. Mike's bass lines are almost like a doo-wop singer or something." And this song really matches up with that vision. You can hear the doo-wop in the bass, the catchy guitar riffs, and the way the drums support the song without overpowering the other instruments. Billy Joe's vocals are well nuanced, his voice cracks the perfect times, and the melody lines give him these little songbird-like trills that sound so good. The combination of all these simple elements really add up to a fantastic song. Track 4 is Coming Clean, and what's interesting is that if you take away the more punk elements, at its core it has an early rock and roll sound to it that reminds me a bit of the Beach Boys. I think this lends a young aspect to the music which perfectly complements the themes of the lyrics. According to Billy Joe, this is about coming to terms with his bisexuality and masculinity. For him, the realization is both a moment of clarity, but also brings about more uncertainty. As stated throughout the song, he felt his parents wouldn't understand, which I think could also be interpreted to mean society as a whole. In other words, it was awesome to realize this part of himself, but this also came with a whole host of other questions. I think what works so well is that the lyrics are rather ambiguous. It doesn't matter if you know what Billy Joe is referring to, the song still works because I think most people experience a lot of change in their later teenage years. He crafted this to have a universal appeal while at the same time making it feel personal. One of the best examples of this is the last 2 lines of the second chorus. He repeats the line, "Now mom and dad will never understand," but he adds, "What's happening to me?" This acts both as a statement that his parents will never understand what he's going through, but the second part acts as a question to himself, which is a great segue to the instrumental bridge section. Here you have this cleaner guitar sound riding on top of the more distorted rhythm guitar. To me, this represents the process of accepting yourself. There's a level of understanding that's cutting through the noise, rising above the sounds of the other instruments. When we return to the final verse, the lyrics reflect this change, especially with the line, "I finally figured out myself for the first time." And the song ends with him singing, "What's happening to me?" I see this as saying with more clarity comes more confusion. Just as you come to some level of understanding, there will be more things to understand. Moving on to track 5, Emenius Sleepus. I think the title is supposed to sound like Latin, but it isn't actually Latin. It's like those funny sounding scientific names from Looney Tunes. My guess is the title is a play on the phrase sleeping with the enemy, which makes more sense within the context of the lyrics. To sleep with the enemy can mean working towards a common goal with someone who would otherwise be seen as an adversary. In this case, the narrator is trying to have a normal conversation with a childhood friend, but at the same time realizing how far they've grown apart or grown in different directions, which I guess the friend could be seen as an enemy since this realization is making the narrator sick. If we step back a bit and look at what Green Day was going through when they signed with a major record label to record this album, many of their peers and others in the Bay Area punk scene viewed this move as sleeping with the enemy, or as it was put so often, selling out. And just like the last song, this track has some great energy throughout. The chorus melody is really catchy, and Trey's drumming has this fantastic stutter aspect to it with his rapid drum fills. For me, it gives this subtle nervousness to the music, which I think underscores the awkwardness of the situation in the lyrics. My favorite part is the bass during the bridge because it sounds like heart palpitations. It's fantastic at placing me in the shoes of the narrator. The hard left and right pan of the guitars also adds this sense of anxiety building up, which is reinforced by the drums skillfully building up in intensity. All of this crescendos into the final chorus, and this is just another great example of their tight and focused songwriting. Track 6 is In the End, and this is a straightforward song with a classic punk rhythm. It has a guitar section that I can jump around to, but what keeps me nodding my head is the bouncing vocal melodies. I love the way he descends on the verses and then holds the word so in the middle of the chorus while the other instruments drop out, adding this nice bit of tension before delivering the final line of the chorus. Supposedly, Billie Joe wrote this about his mom and how she would always end up with guys that weren't great for her, and when the relationship ended, he would be left to pick up the pieces and comfort her. Lyrically, that all makes sense, but again, what is so brilliant about his writing is that he leaves out just enough details so that you, the listener, can come up with your own interpretation. And for me, the overall theme of this song is about letting go of relationships that aren't healthy, which is also an aspect of growing up, circling back to the theme of the album. One thing that really impresses me is how well Trey can keep a steady rhythm while at the same time increasing the intensity. He layers these seemingly random hits and fills that culminate into a rapid succession of drum hits that lead us right into the final chorus and the end of the song. Up next, we have F.O.D, the final track on the album. If there ever was a song to capture the feeling of deep-seated rage and anger towards someone, it's this song. I mean, the title is literally an abbreviation for F off and die. After 13 tracks of electric guitar, this one comes out like a wolf in sheep's clothing. For the first half of the song, it's just Billie Joe singing and strumming an acoustic guitar, but this is really effective at capturing the quiet rage building up inside of him.
It's time I'm on to you.
The chorus makes it seem they've come into conflict over this issue in the past, as he sings, "Let's nuke the bridge we've torched 2,000 times before," which is brilliant because of the idea of burning bridges, which means to sever a relationship. But then there's also the phrase, "water under the bridge," meaning let's put the past behind us, all is forgiven. So in this one line, Billie Joe is saying that he's done dealing with this person and he's gonna burn their bridge so there's no more water under it. And just when I think that's going to be the song, an acoustic number, Trey's drums come in and knock things into high gear with the bass and electric guitar following suit. To me, the aggressive music and the brutal lyrics of this section beautifully expresses the release of his rage. The funny part is that the lyrics for this section aren't printed, but it's pretty obvious that he's yelling at the subject of the song. And again, the lyrics are very universal. Supposedly, Billie Joe wrote this about an ex-boyfriend of his soon-to-be wife, but the lyrics never get that specific, making this song more relatable. And finally, what I love about it is how it feels like the last track or the conclusion of the album. The final lyric is Billie Joe singing "Good Night," and the song resolves on a sustained chord that's held for around 15 seconds. This feels like closure to me. Dookie is a masterful blend of punk sensibilities, catchy hooks, and infectious chorus melodies with heartfelt, relatable lyrics addressing the pains of growing up. The music is tight and focused, full of energy, and without compromise. It's serious when it needs to be, but still maintains a playful feeling without ever becoming sappy or disingenuous. I won't go as far as to call this a concept album because that wasn't the band's intent, but there is a general through line revolving around the emotional hardships of growing up. The lyrics are like poetic journal entries that give us a personal window into the minds of the band. It's just beautiful writing that stands in contrast to the brashness of the music. Ultimately, for me, what makes this album so great is that it captures that time of uncertainty in your early 20s, but it also reflects how this can be some of the best times in your life, when there was nothing better than to just hang out with your friends. Even if you think this album isn't for you, I say give it a shot and hear it at least once because it's vital in understanding where music is today. I think it's that influential. Alright everyone, that will do it for today. Be sure, wait a minute, I think I'm forgetting something. What is it? Oh yeah, the hidden track all by myself. Well, you know, I really didn't forget it, but I just wanted to try and capture some of the spirit of the original intent of a hidden track because the effect gets lost on streaming and even on vinyl, to be honest.
When I'm all by myself.
This song was written and performed by Trey, and big surprise, it's about masturbation. It's a fun song that I don't think makes or breaks the album, but it definitely speaks to the time in which Dookie came out. A lot of bands put hidden tracks on their CDs, and it really felt like finding something special. Alright everyone, that will really do it for today. Be sure to check out my custom cocktail inspired by this album over on my other channel, Mixing with the Geek. Until then, let me know what you think of this record. Were you around when it first came out, or did you discover it later on? I'm curious to know. Until then, I want to thank you all so much for watching, but I especially want to thank my members over on Patreon. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.